And welcome to Channel 6 News. I'm Neil Kenley.
And I'm Lauren Amata. Yes, the rumors are true. Goldman Sachs will no longer be recruiting from Ivy, as they are outsourcing their analysts from investment banking divisions around the world to students from top MBA schools working for $15,000 a year.
We have Laura Javor on site at the Richard Ivey School of Business to report on this.
Thanks, Neil. With the availability of cheap labor in Asia or Africa, Western institutions are taking advantage of the financial benefits of relocating a part of their business to lower labor cost countries, with the number of jobs lost expected to reach 3.3 million by 2015. In India alone, 70,000 business graduates each year are willing to work for $100 a month. We're here with an HBA2 student, Chris Wu, whose contract was recently rescinded by Goldman Sachs New York. Chris, can you tell us what happened? What did Goldman say to you?
Well, essentially they told us that the office had to close because it was a lot cheaper to essentially outsource all of our jobs to India, and they could essentially do all of it at about an eighth of the cost.
Wow, that's crazy. So what are you going to do now?
Well, I'm thinking about traveling for a little bit. I'm probably going to Australia, learn to surf, and spend a couple years down there with the money I've saved. And from there, I'm not really sure.
All right. Well, thank you. I'm terribly sorry to hear about your job.
Amazing.
Outsourcing started in manufacturing and quickly spread to the services industry and is now moving to financial services, referred to as knowledge process outsourcing, as investment banks are starting to outsource their financial analysis and research overseas. As you can see, outsourcing is beginning to affect even Canada's most elite workforce. Reuters is just an example of investment research firms shifting work to countries like Bangalore, where analysts are willing to work for $15,000 a year versus the $80,000 salaries on Wall Street. We are here today with Operations Strategy Professor David Wood to discuss this topic. I'll pass it over to Fanny.
Thanks, Laura. We're here outside the faculty offices at the Richard Ivey School of Business and about to talk to Operations Strategy Professor David Wood. So, Professor Wood, can you please tell us why firms outsource?
Sure. There's a couple of reasons why firms outsource. The first reason usually is to try and cut cost, but cutting cost is really a short-term measure. What most firms try and do is they outsource to gain some sort of competitive advantage that they can't develop or acquire internally. So they'll outsource in order to get access to capacity or access to some sort of core competency that they may not have. In a manufacturing sense, typically they don't have economies of scale as related to that technology, or in services, it may be something that they're just not capable of or not trained in, or it may not be a fit with their strategy. So they outsource those things that other firms do better than they do.
Thank you.
Welcome to my presentation on outsourcing and what's the worst that can happen. So I'd like to tell you a little story. I'd like to start with the Canadian economy in equilibrium. Well, as we're discussing outsourcing, it makes sense that significant outsourcing opportunities will lead to fewer domestic opportunities. This leads to higher unemployment and therefore a decrease in consumption. Now the cool thing about consumption is it's directly correlated with aggregate demand. So a decrease in consumption will result in a decrease in aggregate demand. This will put us in a recession. Now, what happens if we can't create new jobs to help get us out of the recession? Well, our LRAS curve will shift directly to the left. This means that workers will be leaving the labor force, and we will see our unemployment continue to increase. Our Canadian GDP will decrease, our national debt will increase, our money supply will decrease, and overall, it is our outsourcing countries that will prosper. So why can't we solve this? Well, it all comes back to the game theory, or the prisoner's dilemma. As you can see, there's company A and B, and both have the choices of outsourcing or not outsourcing. In this situation, one company outsources and therefore experiences lower costs. They can pass these costs on to their customers and therefore steal profits from the other company. Therefore, the company that outsources is more profitable. As both companies are afraid of not outsourcing, they both do, resulting in a competitive landscape as you can see in the bottom right-hand corner. Now, this is actually worse for society. What would be best for society would be the top left-hand corner, where neither firm outsources. However, this would never happen out of fear that the other would outsource, resulting in a situation back in the bottom right-hand corner. The only reason why we would stay in the top left with no firm outsourcing would be government intervention and regulations.
Pretty scary. I really hope the government steps in if it really does get that bad.
But what if they don't? I hope they don't start to outsource news anchors soon. I hear they're even outsourcing accountants now. Who will survive this?
Well, Neil, it's really the CAs that apply a degree of creativity, like showing clients strategies, and they'll outsource all of the grunt work. So basically, I believe that it's just going to be a higher caliber of jobs that exist.
I see there's a lot of negatives associated with outsourcing.
Yes, I agree with you, but I also think this could ultimately lead to a positive outcome. First of all, global outsourcing gives employment opportunities to people in these developing countries, and ultimately their standard of living will increase. But back at home, we also gain. Companies in developed nations can cut huge costs, and they can concentrate on their core businesses. These costs will actually probably be passed on to consumers, which will increase customer satisfaction and ultimately maximize shareholder value.
I also think that outsourcing can help produce newer and better jobs in the long run. I've been reading most economists also believe that outsourcing jobs to foreign countries will improve the US economy in the years to come. Although US jobs are being lost to India, total exports from American companies to India has grown from $2.5 billion in 1990 to $5 billion in 2003.
Wow, I had no idea. You know what? Ultimately, there's tons of pros and cons to outsourcing, but when it comes down to it, it's up to you, the viewers, to decide what your opinion on this is.
And that's your breaking news for the night.